160 years ago, the Chippewa Indians signed a treaty that outlined regions and rules for tribe members to harvest wild rice in Minnesota.
But the Department of Natural Resources says, unlike other treaties, this one is different.
The DNR position is that off-reservation rights do not exist in the 1855, and absent a permit, which is in effect for today, we would take the normal enforcement action we would on all people.
Minnesota's Chippewa Indians are challenging the state's assertion that those off-reservation rights do not exist.
But there are a few more people watching today, including state authorities and frustrated tribe members who say it's their right to gather rice in this lake, as it says in their nation's treaty from 1855.
Tribal members in canoes set off into a rich sea of wild rice, an intended show of civil disobedience.
Where am I? Where are we going? Open the door, Mama. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. 1493 voyage. 1519 Cortez. 1620 1779 Scorched Earth. 1830 1934 2003. Open the door. Open the door. Let me in. I'll be your warden and in. Let me in.
The United States government made many treaties with Native nations. And Native nations were here long before white people ever came to North America. We have continued to be here throughout the French and the British and Spanish regimes and the birth of the American nation, and we're still here today. Our governments have persisted through that colonial experience and has been further defined and affirmed through the treaty process.
I think what a lot of people aren't aware of is that Indian reservations are sovereign nations within nations. So they're nations within the greater nation. We have a government-to-government relationship with the federal government. We sign treaties with the federal government. We're governed by those treaties. The United States is governed by those treaties. And so based on that, based on the lands that we ceded to make the country what it is today, we got certain rights out of that, and we have certain guarantees and certain, things that the government has said they will honor.
The United States Constitution specifically delineates the power of the United States government to make treaties on behalf of all American citizens. It says treaties are, quote, the supreme law of the land. If America makes a treaty with Japan at the end of World War II that says Japan does not get to keep an army, but we will be their army, we will be their army. And we're still there to protect them from China, North Korea, everyone else. That's binding on both nations.
But we here on our White Earth now are teaching our children about these rights here. And to stand up for our rights. There's no more hiding in the back room when we're confronted. No more of that. We're coming out. And you can see that.
Do kids know about historical trauma? I don't think that we're born, into our communities and sitting around the table listening to aunties and uncles and grandparents talking about our history, about our culture, the good and the bad. I don't think that we put a label on it and say, that's historical trauma. But, for example, when I was growing up, I always heard stories from my uncles, my great uncles, who were very active in promoting treaty rights. So, for example, they always wanted to gather rice on Rainy Lake, which is the community we grew up on. And partway through my development, Rainy Lake was taken over by the federal government and turned into Voyageurs National Park. And so I would hear stories as a kid from my uncles and my great-grandfather about how they would be ticketed and close to arrested, basically being arrested and thrown off the lake for gathering rice that they've always gathered on this lake. They didn't call that historical trauma. That wasn't the word, that wasn't the vocabulary we had for it. But that, in my mind, is one component of historical trauma that resonates again today.
We have rights. We have a right to feed our family. Thousands of years it's been going on here. They have no right to tell us what we can do with our culture. Part of our culture. It goes back to our religion. The Creator. He directed us to this rice here. When we landed on shore, He gave us a path. You follow the lakes and streams. You follow the mega shells. And when you find food growing on water, this is where you're going to settle. We're the largest tribe in this country, from Hudson Bay, Minnesota, New York, down to South Carolina. We're all Anishinaabe people. The different names that you see were given from the missionaries. Divide and conquer. We're the same people, the same language, the same religion.
So the United States government wanted land from all these different tribes, and they entered into treaties, which were not just real estate transactions. They talked about much more than real estate. But as partial payment for the land sold, the United States government offered, most commonly, money, but also specifically retained, not given, but retained rights to hunt, fish, and gather.
Are you going to be citing these people today?
No, we have issued a permit for this event because this is a very important cultural event for the band. The Wild Rice is one of the supreme cultural interests for the Native peoples and their native harvest. And this event today highlights the importance of wild rice for their people. It commemorates Chief Hole in the Day, which again is very proud history for the bands. And again, the water quality issues and habitat issues that support wild rice. So this is I think a good exhibition of wild racing, natural wild rice harvest, and it has been permitted by the commissioner.
But this is a one-day only deal.
Correct. It's a one-day permit.
So if it's tomorrow, they could be cited.
Then we will follow our direction that we've provided the officers to enforce the state regulations on all people fairly.
They claim that they have treaty rights to be doing this anytime. They don't need a special permit to do this.
That is their position.
What is your position?
The state does not believe that those rights exist.
Why not?
I'm not going to get into that. It'd be for the legal department to address, but I will be staging down at the public access, just again for safety to get this away from the highways here.
If you want to change the treaties, fine. Let's renegotiate those treaties. But Native people have lawyers now. It's going to be harder to pull the wool over our eyes, and there's no way to undo those binding transactions, the supreme law of the land, unless you revisit both sides of what was sacrificed in those agreements.
Prior to them coming here, there was millions and millions and tens of millions of natives in this country here, the most beautiful country in the world. They seen this and they had to steal, grab by thievery and every other means to get our land here. You know, history has to come alive here. If we were left alone, we'd be 500 million strong natives in this country instead of 5 million people. 50 years ago, we were less than 1 million here. Think about that. A Holocaust.
What are you going to do today? What are you here to do today? Camera people are going to go out.
We're going to go out and rice. Well, we were hoping that they were going to give us some citation to bring us to court, you know, and then they canceled, the state DNR canceled, give us permission. Give us permission for 1 day to come out. I'm not going to settle for that. I'm not going to settle for that at all.
Are you going to still go out?
Right? You damn right I am. You're damn right. You know?
And then what? Keep coming back? So...
Well, we're going to come back. If they don't want to do that, we're going to come back and we're going to set a net in these lakes over here. You know, I've been over to Wisconsin. I've been supporting those people in Wisconsin. And all the people around over there, the landowners, come by the hundreds, spitting on us as we were walking out to set the spear. Calling us timber niggers. Timber niggers. We're human beings. We're the original people here. The original people.
Anishka Beta Banumba Nundema Geshe Manidu Kashitu Nundema Geshe Manidu Kashitu Anishka Beta Banumba Jashib Neshisak Kenaganungam Jashib